Well, g'day and welcome to the channel. I've been photographing wildlife for 15 years. In that time, I have failed a lot, but during those failures, it's taught me a number of valuable lessons. And today, I'm going to share those lessons with you. Let's start with the first lesson, and it's probably the most obvious, but the only way we improve is by getting out into the field and taking lots and lots of photos. Don't be too upset if your first photos are terrible. Here's my first eastern yellow robin. It's soft, it's just not a very good photo. But over the years, I've learned a number of skills that help me take better photos, such as get eye level with the subject, get down nice and low, get close to the subject, include some space, include some habitat. And now I take photos like this, and I much prefer those. So the key takeaway is don't compare yourself to other photographers. Compare yourself to earlier versions of you, and you will see a big improvement, and that's great. The second thing is something that we all grossly underestimate, and that is our distance to the subject. How close do we need to be to get really good detail? And it's often closer than you can imagine. What we do when we start is we see a subject, we take a photo, and we're often too far away, so we crop heavily. For example, my last video, I was shooting with my 500 f4, a very sharp, very expensive lens, and I had a whistling kite, but it was a long way off. I took a photo, and here's a crop. It just doesn't have any detail and it looks soft, and you might be wondering, is there something wrong with that lens? No, it's just because I cropped it heavily. So if you're cropping heavily, you're going to lose details. How do we overcome that? Well, we have to try and get as close as we can. And I did that, and it enabled me to get this shot, which had way more detail, only because I was able to get close. And if we compare the two, you can see there's no comparison. The exact same lens, but completely different detail, purely based on how close we were to the subject. Simply put, if you want better detail, you either need more focal length or you have to get closer to the subject. There's no real way around that. So the third thing, once we do get close and we take a photo, we really need to consider other compositions. When I started, you often freeze in place, you just take photos, and you forget to move. Why would you want to move? Well, it changes your composition. By moving up, down, left or right, even subtle movements can create reflections or different colors or remove distractions. I encourage you to always be thinking, can I move? Can I get a better photo? With that whistling kite, I took some shots from this angle and I moved to my right and I ended up with 3 different compositions of the same bird. I was able to then later choose which one I preferred. If I'd stayed in that one place, I would never have got those other compositions. So make sure if you're able to, I know sometimes you can't, move around, change your composition. So the fourth thing, getting close. How do we actually do it? It's probably one of the most asked questions I get, and it is very difficult. But often it comes down to the location and what you're trying to photograph. So for me, I was trying to photograph some pink-eared ducks, and these were fairly wild birds. I've got a long lens and I just couldn't get anywhere near close to them. So I got this shot, which is fine, but I wanted some detail showing that pink ear. I could have spent hours and hours at this location and come away with nothing. However, I found out that these birds are actually in the middle of Melbourne in a park where people walk past and they're somewhat tame. So I simply traveled to Melbourne, I went down, I laid down low, these birds came close, and we got all this detail showing that pink ear. So my key takeaway is the location is more important than you might think. Learning and finding these locations is half the battle. So go on eBird, go on Facebook groups, local camera clubs, try and meet other people, find out where people are taking their photos, and then you can visit that location and get those photos for yourself. And once we find a location, sometimes people say it's a bit boring, there's not many interesting birds there. That's when we need to get creative and embrace the light. The light is everything, and I love sunset and sunrise. You can create some very creative shots, backlit, colorful, and I highly encourage you to visit these places when the light's good. It often means getting up early, but it results in some amazing photos. For example, I got up early and captured this sunrise with all these corellas flying around. I would never have got that shot if I'd stayed in bed. By shooting at these times, you can get really creative with your images. When the sun's coming down, I managed to capture this cormorant image, lining up the sun with the bird. I am so happy with this image, and it's all about utilizing that sun. And then the other day, I had the moon coming up. I've managed to take this shot of a cockatoo with the moon behind. That's all taking advantage of these different times of the day, different light, and just getting creative. And I must admit, when I started, I was a bit of a light snob. I used to only go out a few hours after sunrise and a few hours before sunset when the sun was nice, and I wouldn't go out other times because I thought, oh, the images aren't going to look very good. That was a massive mistake, because some of the best images occur when the light or the conditions aren't very good. Think rain, think snow, just all sorts of different light can create different images. And now I definitely embrace that. And you can see this high key black and white image of an egret coming down to land. I just love the shapes. I like the interest behind it. Or this black shouldered kite hovering over a field. Nice black and white images. The light wasn't very good, but I've still created great images. And the other morning we had lots of fog. I thought I'd love to get a kangaroo in the fog. Grabbed my camera, driven down the road. Sure enough, there's a kangaroo in the fog. We took this image. The image quality isn't great, but the overall image is very solid because the fog creates a lot of interest. So don't be afraid of heading out in less than ideal conditions. The next thing is I cannot stress how important a mentor or a friend is in your journey. I learned so much from my mentors, and I've mentioned Matt a number of times on this channel. He shared so much with me that I wouldn't be the photographer today if it wasn't for him. So I highly encourage you to try and join camera clubs, try and find someone in your local area that loves photography as much as you. You'll learn together, you'll have a great time. So I highly encourage you to do that. Now, one of my biggest regrets is not taking enough landscape shots of these beautiful locations I visited. I was so busy photographing the wildlife that I failed to look at the bigger picture and capture memories. The other thing I didn't do was take enough shots of me and my friends out in the field. I took a few, and those are now some of my favorite images that I look at fondly and remember what a great time we had. And when you lose someone like I did with Matt, I've only got a few images and I wish I had so many more. So I highly encourage you, next time you're in the field with your friends, get some shots together, celebrate your time, and you'll always have those to reflect on. And speaking on reflection, if you were to ask me what are some of my favorite memories over the last 15 years, and I would tell you without a doubt, it's all the trips and experiences I had with friends and family. I know trips can be expensive, but those are where you get to see new species. Those are where you get to form memories. And I highly encourage you, when you can, go on as many adventures and trips, because you just never know when you can't do that anymore. You never know when someone's health is no longer able to, or your situation changes. So when you're able, get out there, go on these trips and enjoy yourself. Now, before you go on those adventures, you might be inclined to buy a 5 or 600 f4. The image quality out of those lenses is second to none. However, they come at a cost. I underestimated how much of an impact that heavy gear would have on my enjoyment. You now have to carry a tripod everywhere with you. It's harder to travel, it's harder to respond. And whilst I love that gear, it wasn't until I got lighter gear, the 100 to 500, I started to think, oh, how much more fun is it just to have a light kit to walk around with? And just be aware that the manufacturers are often a little bit sneaky with the weights. Like this Sony 200 to 600, I think they say it weighs just over 2 kilos, the lens. But once we put the lens, the camera, the battery, the memory card, the lens hood, the lens foot, it all adds up. So the working weight of this combo is just over 3 kilos, and it all adds up. And it's something you need to be conscious of before you go out buying these heavier lenses. Just make sure that you are prepared for it and that you can handle that sort of weight out in the field. And speaking of fun, we really do need to enjoy the process. I remember in that first year when I started, I had an absolute blast because I was learning, my photos were improving, I couldn't get enough. And then I discovered social media or sharing my photos online. And once I started to do that, I started to get some likes and some feedback. And any human wants that feedback. We get a bit of dopamine when people like our images. And all of a sudden, my focus started to change. It started to change from enjoying myself to capturing images that other people would like. So I'd go out into the field chasing these images. The problem was when I spent all day in the field and I didn't get an Instagram worthy image, I would go home a little bit disappointed or despondent, feeling like I've just wasted my time because I didn't get that image. And that really removed the enjoyment from me. I was just chasing these images. That's not where my motivation and joy comes from. My joy comes from being out in the field with my camera, taking photos, and it's made me a much happier photographer. So if you're chasing likes, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware. I really encourage you to enjoy the process regardless of the result. Speaking of enjoying the process, when I started with this kit, I drooled over those big primes and those big fancy cameras, but I couldn't afford it. And I always thought, that's what I need to get the best possible photos. However, I quickly learned that I could get some amazing photos with this more affordable gear. And I just recently did a video celebrating budget gear that you're free to check out. There are some incredible photos on there by people using gear less than $1,000 US. So I don't want you thinking you need the very best to get good images. You definitely don't. It helps, but it's not necessary. So just enjoy whatever gear you have, you'll be able to capture some lovely images. So speaking of gear, I've been very fortunate to use just about every camera and lens from the major brands. And if there's one thing I've learned, there's no one best camera and lens. There's pros and cons for all the gear. And ultimately, I had fun with all the gear I used. So I don't want you sitting there thinking, oh, I need to have Canon or I need to have Sony or Nikon's the best. I don't like any of that sort of stuff. Each camera and lens today will enable you to take photos. So just get the gear that best suits your needs and enjoy it. Don't worry so much what other people are shooting with. And once we're out in the field taking photos, remember to give your subjects some space. Something I did when I started was crop heavily. I loved the detail on the subject, so I just removed everything else. And I see this a lot online as well. What we need to do is just give our subjects some space to breathe. We want to try and include some habitat, include some other elements. It just makes the photo more interesting. Yes, you can take tight portraits for Instagram and that's great, but ultimately, I think for me, I want to see more of a story. I want to see more elements. So don't be afraid to leave a little bit more space. You can always crop in after. Just enables you to alter the composition afterwards. So nothing wrong with tight portraits, but make sure that you are capturing both and just leaving a bit of space for later on. And I must admit, when I started, I had a tendency to value image quality over everything else. I thought if the feather detail is good, if the details are great, the image is fantastic. And whilst that's true, it's great to have good image quality, it only makes up one component of a good image. We need to have story, we need to have something that's unique, we need to work with the light, and sometimes the image quality doesn't have to be that good to create a compelling image. For example, this image of a black-fronted dotterel, I love this image, I love the light, I love the setting, but because there wasn't direct light on that bird, the image quality isn't that good, but it doesn't really matter because the composition is so strong. So yes, IQ is important, but don't let it stop you trying to get interesting compositions. When I started, there was one image I took more than any other, and that was bird on a stick. I just loved to see the detail on the subject. You could get really creative with different types of sticks, such as this white-headed pigeon. I still love this image. However, we need to think outside bird on a stick. We need to try to include some other elements just to make that image interesting. It can just get a little bit boring and a little bit same if you use the same dead stick with a bird on it. And for example, here's a cockatoo on a dead stick, and the detail on the bird's great. It's not a bad photo, but it's just missing that other element. So I simply zoomed out, and now we have those background elements. We have the water, we have those dead trees, we still have the bird, but it just makes a slightly more interesting composition. So if you do have a zoom lens, don't be afraid to zoom out. Don't be afraid to try and include some more elements. Now, there's definitely nothing wrong with bird on a stick. I still do that. I just want you to sort of break outside the mold and don't be afraid of capturing different types of images. Speaking of interesting images, when I started, I was a stickler for the rules. I had some rules that I followed and they resulted in a certain type of shot. That was, I would isolate my subject with a blurry background on a perch in direct light with amazing image quality. I got nice and close and we got images like this mistletoe bird. And I still like this image. We've got amazing detail, but by following these rules, I kind of denied myself taking different types of images that I really enjoy now. And if you followed this channel, you would have seen my progression over the years. For example, now you're going to see images like these honeyeaters chasing each other with the sun in the background, creating a really arty type image. Before, I would have just had the sun behind me and I would have captured this type of image, which I'm still very happy with, but I would have never got that other image, if that makes sense. By so increasing our scope and breaking the rules, we're just allowing ourselves to capture lots of different images, and you may find that you prefer one over the other. Like I love these arty style images now, and that's what I'm trying to get when I'm out in the field. So bird on a stick doesn't quite do it for me anymore like it used to, so it's important that we challenge ourselves and find out what our likes and dislikes are as we go through this journey. So one way to figure out images that you like is to take lots of photos. And I take a lot of photos, thousands of photos. And when I started, that was looked down upon a little bit. It was like, you aren't a very good photographer if you have to take lots of photos, because you should be able to time it. And the less photos you take, the better you are. And for me, I just think that's complete rubbish. You can take as many photos as you want. In fact, it's very difficult for us to time that moment perfectly. Once I started shooting with high FPS, I was capturing images I didn't even know existed, only because the camera picked them up. So now when I'm in the field, I'm in a high burst mode and I'm just taking lots and lots of bursts, which ultimately I'll delete most of them afterwards. But if I take enough photos, I will capture those 1 in a million or those rare, unique images. And the last thing I want to share is motivation. A lot of people say, how do you get motivated? I've lost my motivation. And I think we all go through that. I've definitely lost motivation at times. And the key for me is to challenge myself to new things. That is shorter focal lengths, a different style of photography. And sometimes I just have to brute force my way into it. So I say to myself, all right, we're going out birding tomorrow, regardless of the weather, the conditions, how I feel. I'm going, jump in the truck, I get out to where I'm going, I start taking photos, and I think, why didn't I want to do this? I'm always so happy when I'm in the field. So if you are lacking motivation, often the key is just to get out there and start shooting. Maybe visit somewhere new. But once we're in the field, we've got our gear. If we enjoy that process, it's just wonderful for our mental health. So I highly suggest, if you're struggling for motivation, use this video for motivation and get out there and just photograph some birds or wildlife. Well, that brings this video to an end. I hope you found it useful. What did you take away from today's video? What were the key things that you learned along the way? Jump down to the comments. If I've forgotten something, maybe share what you found most helpful in your journey. We've got a great community. So if you like this video, obviously give it that thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Happy birding. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.